Howdy, I'm Jammer. So, yeah, we're talking about Batman today. So, when we talk about Batman comics, and we've done a couple of them here on the channel, it's important to recognize that there is a very ravenous is probably the wrong word, but we'll use the word dedicated instead. There's a very dedicated fan base about Batman. This book is canon. This book is not canon. This book is awful. This book is amazing, and we need to be talking about it all the time. And this book is great, but it ignores Batman Detective Comics number 344 on the 8th page, on the 4th panel, because, well, you get the idea. Batman is a topic that, honestly, I'm not really always that comfortable approaching, because Batman as a character is something I'm just kind of over. But at the same time, I remember being a kid and just raiding the VHS, just the VHS cabinet at my parents' house, and always going again and again and again and again to the Batman movie, because I loved the Batman movie. It was a fun movie. I loved Jack Nicholson's Joker. It was a fun read. And so it's kind of a love-hate relationship back and forth. And so whenever I approach a DC book, particularly a Batman book, I'm like, okay, what do I want to bring? Or if I decide to do a Batman book on this channel, what exactly do I want to bring to it? Well, again, when it comes to this channel, the concern always is, are comics an art form? To which case the answer is always, duh. But it's also then, yes, let me tell you why. And so I thought it would be fun again to just try to tackle a book that I enjoy, and more importantly, a kind of popcorn-esque book that I really enjoy, and try to find some artistic, air quote, merit to it. And so I thought a really fun one to do would be Batman Hush. Now again, this is important as well. I don't care about spoilers. I like talking about the full story, and I'm going to be hopping around sometimes in terms of the narrative itself. If you've never read Batman Hush, I would encourage you, stop the video, come back in 2 weeks or so, we'll be talking about another book. But if you don't care about spoilers and you just want to see me talk about Batman for half an hour, or hopefully only 20 minutes, whatever, keep watching. Let's get into Batman Hush and talk about why I think it's pretty great. Okay, so we are continuing with the story. Wait, what? You haven't read Hush? Then why are you still here? Go away. I'll wait. You gone? Good. Okay. You thought I was going to say something tacky about their pants, right? They actually wore nice pants today. They really did. Anyway, when we're talking about Batman, particularly Batman Hush, it's important to recognize one thing right off the bat, and that is this name right here. Jeph Loeb. Jeph Loeb is a pretty big name in terms of comics. I don't know if he's working very much in the scene these days, but in his time, Jeph Loeb managed to tell a great number of stories. And one of them, you'll note immediately to my right, is one of them. Batman the Long Halloween, a book that I really do want to talk about on the channel at some point in the future, is still a beloved classic, and a lot of comic fans really love this story. And also, fun fact, this book was really instrumental for Christopher Nolan when he was directing The Dark Knight. It's an important and impactful Batman story. Now, you come off of The Long Halloween, you write a book like this, you're pretty much given a kind of golden ticket. What is that golden ticket? Well, that's actually the next name right here, Jim Lee. Now, if you've never read a Jim Lee comic before, I should let you know you're in for a particular visual rhythm. And when I mean a particular visual rhythm, I'm talking about one very important thing. You're talking about a lot of buxom babes and a lot of burly dudes. Jim Lee is a great artist. His style is, Well, we'll get about that when we talk about the formal elements. But the point is here is this is very much a book which sort of falls into the sort of traditional understanding of what a superhero comic book is. The story, very simply, is that Batman is interrupting a kidnapping by Killer Croc, which right off the bat, anybody who knows the Batman universe goes, Killer Croc? Kidnapping? I thought he just killed people and ate them. Well, good on you for knowing your Batman trivia. But yes, it begins off with Batman rescuing a young kid from Killer Croc, and on the way, he's eventually escaping the scene, or no, excuse me, leaving the scene to pursue Catwoman, who has stolen the money that was originally going to be paid to Killer Croc for the ransom. While he is chasing Batwoman, somebody severs his line, and he collapses into Crime Alley, where he's beset upon by homicidal homeless people. Now, right off the bat, the person who works at a library in me, who's done tons of homeless training, goes like, wait, what? What? This is the dude that's protecting them again. You know what? Whatever. The point is that Batman suffers a severe head injury and calls upon a man from his past by the name of Thomas Elliot. Now, Thomas Elliot is really important. Let me see if I can't. Yes. Thomas Elliot is really important because, as we eventually learn through a series of flashbacks in the story, Thomas Elliot was Bruce Wayne's biggest and probably only friend growing up. Elliot's father was a high-powered banker. Bruce Wayne's father was a surgeon. They spent a lot of time together. But one thing led to another, and they just kind of separated. That's the start of the book. Eventually what happens is Batman begins to recognize more and more and more that somebody is pulling the strings around him and basically coordinating all of his former foes, from Joker to the Riddler to Ra's al Ghul to Poison Ivy, what have you, into basically pulling all manner of hijinks against him and potentially putting his life in danger. Now, why is this important and why is this significant? Well, it's not necessarily important or significant, but what is important about this book is the fact that it's mostly a mystery. We're trying to find out sort of continually, who is it that's messing with Batman? Who is it that's pulling all of these strings and pitting all of his foes against him? Now, this is where I say, spoiler alert, it turned out to be Thomas Elliot. Yeah, sorry. To be fair here, it's also not just Tommy Elliot. It's also, again, spoiler alert here, the Riddler. Yeah. And immediately some people will be kind of like, oh, okay, well then I now know what happens. What's the point of reading it? The point of reading it is that, narratively speaking, this is, again, as I mentioned in several previous videos, a popcorn book. You're reading it to effectively kind of become like Leonardo DiCaprio in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, to sit there and go, ooh, yeah, that I know that character. But at the same time, it's a mystery story. A mystery mixed in with a superhero story. So on the one hand, we have sort of grand cinematic episodes of Harley Quinn interrupting an opera, and Batman sort of cascading down in a beautiful 2-page spread. But then at the other hand, we have Batman sort of stopping the Riddler in the middle of a fight. Or we observe Batman chasing after Thomas Elliot in a particular scene and thinking that the Joker has shot him through the chest. And so we get all these sort of dramatic twists and turns. This narrative, like I said already, is a mystery. And so as the reader's going through it, we're kind of trying to continually figure out, who exactly is this messing with Batman? How exactly are they able to do all this financially? Just how? What's happening? It's a fun mystery for the reader. And also, at the same time, it manages to become a really interesting story, narratively speaking, about Batman, aka Bruce Wayne's inability to trust other people. Because at the same time that he is sort of continually struggling with a sort of shadow figure, sort of hiding and milling about, we also have, in my opinion, a kind of melodramatic love story between him and Catwoman. And so what's really interesting, too, about this book is that longtime fans are going to sort of fall back upon this traditional love story that it's always the will they, won't they? But in this book, we get, or at least up until the very end, a nice love story between Batman and Catwoman that doesn't just spiral off into a lot of empty flirting. We get to see the two characters actually fall in love. Now, I recognize at 7 minutes I've already said enough. If you want to read the story, check it out. It's a really fun popcorn read. But narratively speaking, what's enjoyable about this is that it doesn't shy away from what it's trying to do. This is a superhero comic. It's a popcorn book. It's a mystery. It's just trying to make you go, wow, this is really fun and kind of interesting. And then, too, it also manages to bring a lot of interesting humanity to the character of Batman, especially to a character who far too often it becomes a kind of ubermensch or just this perfect character who always knows everything. This is a book where, for once, Batman doesn't have all the answers. He doesn't know what is happening. And so it's fun for the reader to just kind of appreciate that a character who's seemingly just omniscient go, wait a minute, what just happened? Check it out. It's a fun read. Now, that would be enough in and of itself. But again, this channel is interested why, artistically, in terms of the medium, why am I taking half an hour to talk about this book? Well, despite the fact that this is kind of a fun popcorn book, it also manages to be a very interesting story, visually speaking. And so let's talk about why formally I think Batman Hush is worth your time. Whew. Okay, so I've talked now a fair amount about why I think Batman Hush, narratively speaking, is a fun book. It's just a nice, fun, enjoyable read that's sure to keep the reader just going like, ooh, what's going to happen here? What's going to happen here? What's going to happen here? But now it's also important to recognize what are the interesting aspects of Batman Hush. Because again, there's literally thousands of Batman books out there at this point. Why should I take the time and effort to spend, again, somewhere around half an hour talking about this book? Because I wouldn't if it was just some casual throwaway Batman story, or at least if I didn't perceive it as some casual throwaway Batman story. Well, again, like I pointed out, again, you're dealing with Jeph Loeb, the writer, and Jim Lee, the artist. Now, Jim Lee is an artist, again, that I've noted, and you saw my little spiel earlier. He's somebody who's pretty big in the comics community. He's been around for a long time. You really got to see him sort of really starting up in the late 80s, and then he sort of came to fruition during the 1990s, and since then he's just kept making better and better and better comics. Well, he's just kept making comics, period. One of the things I'm not a big fan of about Jim Lee is that oftentimes a lot of his men are kind of more or less the same person, and that really sort of kind of comes to a head in this particular shot in the back of a limousine where Thomas Elliot and Bruce Wayne are talking. Apart from a haircut, these might as well be the same dudes, apart from one or two minor details. And something similar can happen in regards to his women as well. Oftentimes, they tend to be just the same vivacious babe, but with a different makeup pattern, different skin tone, or a different hairdo. Okay, having said that, Jim Lee is an amazing artist, and he pays attention visually to the medium of comics, and more importantly, he tends to be a very physically expressive artist. Now, again, check out any one of my previous videos, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Archer and Armstrong, and you'll know, again, that panel layouts are really instrumental in order to convey emotion and action and energy. So, in one particular instance, Batman and Catwoman they've tracked down Poison Ivy, who we discover is the sort of mastermind behind Catwoman being brainwashed and stealing the money at the very beginning of the book. They go to Metropolis, where Poison Ivy is staying, and they discover something. In a beautiful passage, Poison Ivy says, "Good thing I brought my own champion." And then you hear, well, let's just show you this page here. So you'll see right off the bat, we have a thoom. We have a crack. We have a, what was that? Thash. Because who could forget? Thash. That's a big one. And then, of course, we have Waroom. And of course, we also get a really nice moment where we get a no. Not here, not now, not him. And then, of course, we know who it is, but we then get the beautiful page turn, and we see Superman floating through the air, his cape billowing away. Catwoman lies sprawled on the floor. Batman looks defeated, and he recognizes that he's in the worst possible fight of all time. It's so hammy. It's just so hammy. But it works, because again, the audience at that moment is engaged by the visual elements that Jim Lee and also Scott Williams are doing in this moment. You'll note here the interruption of the theme is also highlighted by these two panels here. We get what a kind of like sort of skeletal just panel that looks like it's kind of bleeding or breaking apart, which is fitting because again, Clark Kent, aka Superman, is just shattering through the walls. We see the automatopoeia are feeding the action sequences as well as just the body language, the motion of dirt sort of falling from Superman's hands, and then this beautiful line work to demonstrate that this huge concrete wall is just being casually thrown aside, and we get a nice shadow technique where we just see teeth and his slit-like eyes. Again, it's little things like this throughout Batman Hush that really convey such a wonderful sense of the energy of this book. Again, if I can go back to this page here, we have the setup of Harley Quinn sort of interrupting the opera in just beautiful Harley fashion. And then if we turn the page here, you'll note this just gorgeous sequence. And I'd encourage you to pause the video and just look at this layout here for a second. Again, we have the layout of Harley interrupting and kind of delivering a super hammy, ridiculous lecture that's full of just opera puns and just things that make you, hashtag cringe. But at the same time, what the reader cannot deny is that there's a wonderful sense of energy. If you look at this panel here, we can observe Harley Quinn just like doing backflips back and forth and leaping up into the balcony here. And so we move from one side of the page and all the way over to the balcony over here before we get this action sequence, which is then interrupted by a flashback. And then, of course, Harley runs away. I'm sorry, I'm so awkward, but, what can you do? And then, of course, you get this beautiful two-page spread. And I've talked before, the two-page spread is very, very, very customary when you talk about superhero comics, because you want to convey powerful men and women doing grand physical actions. But at the same time, what's good about this two-page spread is you get a real sort of heightened sense of drama. Now, also note, you'll note Harley has a butt. This is, again, one of these things about superhero comics that I like. But on top of the butt, you'll also note something appears to be happening to her spine. Yeah, it's a very Jim Lee book. But at the same time, despite the miraculous anatomy of Harley Quinn, we get a nice two-page spread that gives the reader a sense of, whoa, this is Batman. And it heightens the drama for us as well. This book is very much aware of the way that the page turn can work in a book. But just as much, let's go back to a previous sequence and talk about the way that memory plays a vital role in this book. Or actually, I'm going to progress a little forward. After the scene in the actual Opera House, of course, I showed you earlier, there's a shot of Joker standing over Thomas Elliott's body with a gun. The reader is led to believe the Joker shot him, even though he claims innocence, and we discover later on that, in fact, no, the Joker didn't actually shoot. The Joker did not actually shoot Thomas. Now, Bruce discovers this scene, and the reader is then given these pages. While Batman is, of course, beating up Joker and possibly about to kill him, you'll note the shift in color. And this is important. When we talk about color in comics, uniformity can be really important to communicating tone. If you stick with the same color pattern or the same color technique throughout a book, it conveys something about the reality that the characters are experiencing. Throughout this text, you'll observe a kind of fuzziness. And that's important because whenever Loeb and Lee take you to a dream sequence, or particularly a memory sequence, you'll note the colors begin to sort of soften and you get these almost beautiful watercolor paintings. And even in the most horrific moments, whether we get these big dramatic red sequences too, they're using the sort of visual blurriness to convey the fact that we're falling back upon memory in these instances. It's an interesting trick because on another hand, another artist may have simply, again, used this particular style, but just sort of convey to the reader through words that this was a memory. By allowing the colors to blur in this way, while also using Batman's internal monologue, the reader is able to understand that these are dream/memory sequences. Again, it's a non-visual, or at very least, it's a subtle way to communicate memory without just bonking it over the reader's head and going, this is a memory. I mean, honestly, sometimes it can seem like that, but for the most part, one of the things I enjoy about Hush are these memory sequences, because on the one hand, there are ways to sort of throw back to sort of classic Batman stories and Batman comics, but then at the same time, in other instances as well, we have really interesting sequences where the reader is just given an opportunity to kind of look at Bruce's experience and kind of travel back in time with him. And then one last thing I really wanted to talk about in terms of this book is we observe in one of the last final passages, we get the big reveal, this whole plot was the Riddler. That Thomas Elliot was really instrumental in everything, but it was ultimately the Riddler who set about all of these details. Now, immediately some people will ask themselves, well, wait, if the Riddler knows Batman's true identity, why doesn't he just, kill Batman and all his friends and family? You're going to have to read the book to figure that out, mate. Think about it. Anyway, what I wanted to bring attention to is in the reveal of Riddler, you'll get this page here that was just absolutely beautiful to me, largely because it really shows how important the word balloon is in terms of not just delivering the dialogue of the character, but the way it can ultimately frame a page or create a moment in comics. You'll see, just by looking at it from afar, there's a lot of word balloons on this two-page spread. But at this moment, the reader is kind of coming full circle. So we need a lot of dialogue. We need to understand absolutely everything to happen if we're to get any kind of, at the very least, satisfaction as a reader to understand the mystery. But at the same time, the dialogue balloons also do a really good job oftentimes of framing these characters within the space and heightening the dramatic tension that Batman has in relation to having this conversation with the Riddler. I could talk about this book, honestly, for hours, because just page after page after page after page, it's beautifully constructed, it's beautifully laid out, the colors are wonderful, panel layouts are gorgeous. There's some of the most wonderful panel layouts you'll probably ever see in an action book. This spread here of Superman flying really quickly to save Lois Lane is probably one of my favorite pages in the whole book. But honestly, Hush is really fun for the way it's able to sort of build off of a lot of the dramatic tension that the story is throwing into, while also reminding the reader that even if this is a fun popcorn book, it still manages to convey a lot of emotional register as well as physicality and register through the arrangement of the panels, through a careful use of colors. Batman Hush is a great example of what you can do formally with comics to tell a really interesting story. All right, let's do the last hurrah, and then we'll call it a day. Somebody's messing with Batman. Who's messing with Batman? The Riddler. But we don't know that. We don't know that yet. There's a mystery, and we've got to figure out point by point by point, how does he do it? How does he get figure A to position B? How does he get, I'm going to stop this interesting way to sum up the book and just be me. Batman Hush is really fun. It's a fun book, and it's probably one of my favorite Batman stories. And it's a story that has appeared now in the Batman canon because, again, it's a solid book. Narratively speaking, this book did a lot for Batman in terms of the Batman universe. It introduced the new character of Thomas Elliot, a.k.a. Hush, a figure who has appeared now in the Batman video games and in new Batman installments. I think actually last year there was a new Batman Hush storyline that I didn't get a chance to read it, but I heard great things about it. fans of Batman are going to find dozens of things to love about this book. There's the appearance of Superman. You get to see the Joker. You get to see Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, and you get to see all these great Batman villains. Ra's al Ghul makes an appearance. Lex Luthor is president. You get to see Killer Croc wearing a trench coat that he probably stole off of Constantine's corpse. JK, unless. Anyway, but you get a fun read. And on top of that, you have a very, very wonderful artist in the hands of Jim Lee, who manages again to convey the wonderful physicality that he's so good at expressing, and then just setting up beautiful page layouts that are able to make the reader just navigate this fun story, just making them just turn page after page after page to see what you can do visually in comics, to not just to sort of convey emotion or to convey drama, but then also just to convey the rhythm and tone of the story itself. Batman Hush is just a fun read, but it's also, subtly enough, a really great comic in terms of observing how you can use the medium to heighten your drama, to heighten your narrative, and just make a really solid comic. Check it out. It's worth your time. All right, I'm going to call it a day there. Thank you so much for watching. I tremendously appreciate it. As always, please like, share, and subscribe. All that jazz. It lets me know that you're enjoying these videos and you want to see more. Also, please, 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 don't forget, there is a Patreon for this channel as well as for my visual art. I only have one tier on Patreon. It's a $1 a month donation, so if you have $1 every month that you don't mind parting with, or even just $1 this month, or this week, or this day that you don't mind parting with, throw a couple pennies in my pot, because it'll help me keep making these videos. It'll help me keep being able to afford paints and markers, which are really freaking expensive. So please, 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 be my buddy. On the note of Batman Hush, this is a pretty popular story. I almost guarantee you that your local comic book shop has this. Now note, this is a bound trade, meaning it's a lot of individual issues that have been bound into one single book. Meaning that if they don't have a physical copy of the trade itself, you might check their old issue bins and see if you can't find some of the individual issues. It may take you some time to get them all together, because again, Hush is pretty popular, but if you can find them all, it's worth the hunt, and it's honestly kind of fun. Also, don't forget, though, as well, that you live in a world with public libraries, and more public libraries are opening up their minds to the reality that people want to read comics. So check out their comics and graphic novel section. If they don't have one, go ask for an interlibrary loan form, and they can help you out with that. And again, seriously, thank you so much for your time. I tremendously appreciate it. Go read some comics.